This is our final session with Martin Romacker. He's accepted my offer to return, and what an honor for us to get a deeper dive into the real inner workings of the RDF and semantic driven platform he's been able to create over there within the R&D community. In essence, this is part two of the earlier presentation that we had done in February, and I suggest that you rewatch that sometime. I learned so much the second time around, and this session will showcase the capabilities in a production environment. So Martin, please wow us with all of that you and your team have created.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the invitation to present or to demo more of our work here. I have a couple of slides just to kick it off, to give it a bit of more context, and I think it also quite nicely fits to the presentation that we have seen before, because I think the vision that we're having and what we're working towards is to eliminate transformations as much as possible, to really get rid of data integration layers using semantic technologies. And this requires a specific approach, which we call FAIR by design. And I would like to, on the one hand, explain to you a little bit more some of the concepts, basic concepts, but then really show to you the tool that we have been using, our semantic platform, which is entirely built into RDF, providing semantic reference data. And then we have this true fairy tale where our dataset portal, which is a data catalog of data catalog, is being generated without any data transformation, just by reading out a dozen of different internal data catalogs. So with this, I'm starting the presentation. Slides are coming through. That's very nice. Yeah, just to repeat a little bit the simple view on FAIR that we are having. So FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. So it has the the human aspect, the human facet, which is about the ability of a scientist or any kind of data consumer to find, access, and understand the data semantically without the presence of the data owner. So no one should be around to explain the semantics of what data consumers see. The second point is possibly more important, is about, machines. So how machines can communicate. And FAIR here means that a machine can automatically find data, but also make a semantic use out of the data. So we're talking here about machine actionable, so true machine actionable. Looking into, say, this FAIR in action, I've created here kind of a scale going from unstructured via semi-structured data to structured data. And then on the top, which possibly comes a little bit as a surprise, we have FAIR relaxed and FAIR strict data. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think, of course, if you look into unstructured data, this is typically free text documents. So even if you have a table in the free text, it's still free text. You cannot access the table elements in a semantic way. Semi-structured, and I'm picking up here an example from the industry I belong to, so pharma industry, is something like a registry of clinical trials that you can see in the US, clinicaltrials.gov. On the one hand, you have here a structure like, for example, what are the primary outcomes of the study or the secondary outcomes, but the content in these structures is still just free text, and you cannot access this semantically. The next level, and I'm taking here an example from an industry standard, which is called Animal. It's for standards in lab automation. You have a structure, you have a schema definition for XML, but these schemata, they are poorly semantically normalized. So we have here, you define here, for example, a type, animal type. You also have a set of elements that occur here and some other elements for the schema definition, but this doesn't give you any semantics. So what is really the intended meaning of what is conveyed here with the schema? And then at the next level, we have something that we call FAIR relaxed. I'm also referring here to the FAIR maturity indicators that I will show on the next slide. And this is a JSON output from an endpoint we have here internally about clinical studies. We have elements like study identifier, study number, or here the scientific area. And in this specific case, we have a schema definition, but we are already starting to use controlled vocabulary. So the terms that we use here for scientific area or for the study indication or the phases or the study type, they're all coming from controlled vocabularies. So that's the FAIR relaxed version. And the last point, I'm picking up here an example from a Pistoia Alliance project, which is about the fair annotation of bioassay data coming from PubChem. And here we are using the bioassay ontology. And you see that the schema that we're offering here for the annotation is ontology driven. That means that both for the properties, I've highlighted here the property of a bioassay type, and the values that you can find here, like what is the assay mode of action, like inhibition, activation. These are all defined in ontology, and they have clear semantics. So this is then relating to fair strict, because recapitulating this from the fair metrics, also picking this up from another Pistoia Alliance project I'm involved in, from the so-called FAIR toolkit. You find the link also in the presentation that we can share after this meeting today. Data and metadata use formal, accessible, shared, broad accepted languages for knowledge representation, relaxed any structured information, strict ontologies, and machine resolvable formats. And the same applies here to data and metadata. They use vocabularies ontologies that are fair, relaxed, human readable, that have you seen on the previous slide, and strict is the vocabulary terms are machine readable. And for me, these slides, they highlight one important point also underlying digitalization. So I think digitalization does not only mean that we change the modality of our assets from physical material to machine readable. So just creating a PDF, for example, out of a paper document. What we have to achieve, really, to be fair and to really leverage our data assets, is we have to make our data machine actionable. A machine actionable only comes with fair strict data. And of course, machine actionable then also implies the usage of semantic technologies at scale, ontologies, terminologies, semantic metadata. So that's the first part. The second part, I think, is more related to what we have been doing internally, and also plays into what semantic arts and David McComb would call, say, data-centric revolution. This is the so-called Roche data commons, where we really flip the coin in data management. So this is an abstraction where we have 5 layers. So the first layer below here is the physical infrastructure where the digital objects reside. Then on top of this, we have a data management layer where we create our data catalogs, the management of the data assets with rich metadata and workflow languages to move our data around or to apply algorithms to our data. And the third layer is very, very important. It is about these harmonized data access points. And in the harmonized data access points, we are organizing our data in a completely data or information-centric way around information types. We have these data points for adverse events, clinical studies, digital biomarkers, flow domains of a pharmaceutical company. Applications on top of our data stack and not at the bottom as we typically would do. So we flip the coin to a certain extent. And what holds all of this together are the reference data services. So this is what you need to make your data fair at scale and to comply to the Roche data commons, to be data and information centric. You have to provide input resources in terms of terminologies, semantically managed metadata, kind of a semantic metadata registry, defining semantic dataset models, simple schemata, and last but not least, ontologies. And if you want to be fair, if you want to go into the realm of semantics, everybody, and I don't have to tell this to this community, of course, but I have to tell this to many colleagues who are in the IT organization and beyond, is you have to start to think about everything as a resource. And also in the previous presentations about the practical transformations, Katharina, she also introduced IRIs for, in essence, all the objects that we have been manipulating. So a digital object sitting on a file system is a resource. A data catalog element is a resource. A data set is a resource. Vocabularies are resources. Concepts and vocabularies are resources. Schemata are resources. And The actual verification based on the reference data services happens at layer 2 and 3. So this is where you use your URIs, your semantic reference data, to verify your data. And then if at layer 4 or 5, you still have to do transformations, you have done something wrong in your semantic stack. So we want to build our systems fair by design and using semantic reference data at all levels in layer 2 and 3. And this really helps us a lot to work towards this transformation-less integration of data. So just to give this is now related to the example that I will show to you later in the demo. We have here at the various layers spelled out some data catalogs, for example. Here's Avados is about omics data. FireDB contains study data. Quasar has biomarker data. Clinical data sharing environment contains clinical study data. And all of these resources here at layer 2 have been prospectively verified. So we use our reference data, which is here. So RTS is the system that I'm going to demo to you. We use these and we harmonize everything prospectively. And then at the HDAP level, at the API level, which are also using the same approach, we expose the content in a semantic way. So we're using already URIs to talk about an indication, about a scientific area, about a clinical study phase. And then on top of this, where we aggregate the data in applications, the applications here are these blue squares. We just have to read this out and it comes into the system without any transformation. And after demoing the semantic platform that we use to hold the reference data, I will also show this application here on top of the RD dataset portal to you and give you some more insights on how we have been using semantics to make this happen. So having said this, we simply have to look into the semantic product line that we offer to our colleagues in the business, which we currently call the Scientific Interoperability Hub. Possibly one day we'll find a better name for that, which in essence contains 3 products. So this is the terminology management proper. For example, all the indications, the drugs and the compounds, human anatomy, including cells, tissue, and similar stuff. Then we have the semantic dataset definition, where we also register all of our data and metadata elements. And last but not least, the conceptual modeling. So these purpose-driven ontologies. We sometimes try to avoid a little bit the term ontology when we talk to non-semantic colleagues. We use here more the term conceptual modeling, but we are talking here about ontologies. So these products, they are supporting fair by design and verification at scale. And we also have a service on top that ensures that the data are really born fair. So we support our various parts of the organization. By the way, we don't have any scope here. So we go from really research development into manufacturing, marketing, and partnering. We support them to ensure this prospective verification and semantic operability together with high data quality. And the products, they are reference data, as mentioned before. And we do not only link internal data, but also external data assets for data acquisition and data integration. Of course, our systems are also fair themselves. And so far, we support more than 100 productive applications across all Roche functions and sites. So in essence, we have built this stack in an in-house developed tool, where we have terminology management at the bottom, which is then enhanced by dataset modeling and the semantic metadata registry. We put conceptual models on the top. And then if you really have this full stack of semantic expressivity, and you use this across the organization, then you can really easily and transformation-less aggregate your data in a fair, unified domain model or in a corporate knowledge graph. So the corporate knowledge graph is a kind of an aggregate of fully verified domain and purpose-driven semantic repositories. So I'm going to switch gears here and go into the tool. So this is the web client that we have here internally to manage our resources. So this is the central place where we are managing our reference data. Today in the demo, I will focus only on the terminology part because otherwise it would take too long. The terminologies are here on the first tab. The metadata registry and the semantic dataset definition is here on the third tab for the variables. And here we have a very, very nice and sophisticated way of treating our reference models, our purpose-driven ontologies across domains, where we also ensure full fairness and full interoperability from the very beginning. But today we want to focus on the terminology part proper. So the terminologies are organized in so-called master terminologies. For those who are familiar with SCOS, so we have defined these terminologies as a subclass of SCOS concept scheme. And the look and feel of the tool is very uniform. So whenever I select the resource here, I get the entity properties here on the right side in the main window. So currently we have 50 master terminologies with highly curated concepts around 150,000. So these are really, this is the number of concepts that the team that I belong to have integrated and curated for governance purposes to apply them within the various different application contexts. If I open up this tree, I will see all the master terminologies. Meta terminologies are terminologies that we use to offer also metadata about the terms. You will see this in a second. And hosted terminologies are terminologies that we don't maintain ourselves. We just read them in. If you are from the pharma or healthcare industry, there are resources like Medra that you use for regulatory purposes, like reporting of adverse events. Mesh is the indexing language of PubMed, Medline, which is a very important resource to retrieve literature in the biomedical space. The reason why we're doing this, we're using them ourselves to do our due diligence when we create new concepts. And secondly, it allows also consumers to access hosted terminologies by the same access mechanism that we have here on the master terminology side. Sorry. So these are the master terminologies, and let me just pick up one. Go here to the indications. Again, I click here and I get the entity properties on the right side. And also following the FAIR principles, we have rich metadata about the resources that we're having here. So the concept scheme, SCOS concept scheme for indication, of course, has a URI. It has a last publication date. We also have an owner. We have deputies. The visibility is public. And then we have a couple of properties. Here, for example, we determine what are the allowed cross-references for a concept entry in this resource. Again, for people who are familiar with pharma or life science, you can, for example, say, if I have an indication term, I might have a cross-reference to Medra, to Mesh, to Mondo, NCI Thesaurus, OMIM, which is about inherited genetic diseases, Oro is about rare diseases. But this is all formally defined, semantically specified, and fully governed. There's also some information about the attributes. So the system is multilingual. So we also support other languages like Chinese, Spanish, Croatian, French. Again, all governed, all organized. We also maintain the provenance of entry terms, where they come from. This is what we call the source. And last but not least, we also have what we call label types. So label types is a markup of entry terms that have either linguistic information, like is something an acronym or an abbreviation or a short name. For example, Roche is a short name of F. Hoffmann La Roche. And these are very, very important hints if you want to apply these terminologies in text mining or semantic indexing, for example. As you may know, acronyms sometimes require a different treatment than normal synonyms because they can create ambiguity in indexing processes. So now at the next level, I'm going to pick up an entry. I'm looking here for non-small cell lung carcinoma. So here on the left top, we have a search functionality, and I select the term. This will now open up the tree structure on the left side and the entity properties of the concept on the right side, reading it out from our triple store. And now the descriptions get even richer. So let's start here. first in the concept entity property. So we have a so-called preferred label, that's this COS-pref label. By the way, we are using, for those of you who are interested also more in the semantic piece, we are using a COS-XL in addition of COS, because we want to make statements about literals, which is not possible in COS. So with COS-XL, you also get a resource for labels. So we have here a preferred label, which is non-small cell lung carcinoma. We have hundreds of business rules how these pref labels should look like. It belongs to the indication master terminology. We also have a life cycle for these entries that plays a role, for example, in the organization master terminology, where you have companies that go out of business, you have merging and acquisition events, you have spin-offs, and we use this to maintain the life cycle of concepts. Of course, in good practices, we have a definition for this concept, and comments. This is more for us curators to have give us hints or as a memory to see what we have been thinking when something was created. Now here you see the list of all the various synonyms which are available. We're using here, as mentioned, COS. So we have so-called pref label. Alternative labels are synonyms, which are semantically fully equivalent. And then there are also these so-called hidden labels, which you sometimes introduce. A typical pattern, for example, in the usage of terms is that people omit the type. So they say lung non-small cell, and they omit the cancer. It's not a true synonym, but you need it for integration or mapping purposes. Then we also add here the language tag with the source as mentioned, and the label type. So I can, for example, see here what is the acronym which are available here, and then if you have the acronym, we all have two mandatory elements. So one is the definition of the acronym, where the acronym comes first with the term comes first with the acronym in brackets, and the acronym expanded, where the acronym comes first, and then you have the term in brackets. So there are a lot of rules that we apply to have comprehensive and well-defined synonym sets. The second tab here relates to the so-called cross-references, and our industry spends a lot of time and effort to maintain these cross-references, because unfortunately, we cannot say there's just one URI in the world to talk about non-small cell lung cancer or non-small cell lung carcinoma. And this is just a way to relate the entries, for example, in MEDRA, MESH, Mondo, or experimental factor ontology to the entry that we are having. And sometimes you also need this functionality to be able to translate between different coding or reference systems. And in the clinical space, for example, people use a lot of this SNOMED, systemized nomenclature in medicine. In regulatory, they are legally obliged to use MEDRA. Literature retrieval, you have MESH. If you submit data to the FDA for drug approval, you have to use the NCI code. So it's very, very important to have this meta information. What you can also do, which is quite nice, and it's all, again, everything what you see here is semantically encoded. So there's everything is RDF. You can also use these cross-references to define so-called data links. So now if I'm interested to say, how does this entry look like in Wikidata, I can use this cross-reference, and then I can access the Wikidata page. And this also helps a lot to support the idea of linked data. Now, if I'm, for example, interested to know, okay, what are the drug therapies related to non-small cell lung carcinoma, which have been recorded in Wikipedia, I can make an easy join across these resources if I use the available Sparkle endpoint for Wikidata. So this is very powerful and very useful. I can do the same, say here with the NCI code, for example. I go to this case to the NCI browser, and this is the entry here. Or Mesh also has two options. So one is that you use the browser, or you can use the URI for accessing a medical subject heading. So we are building in this idea of linked data in the way how we represent our terminologies. Last but not least, we also have relations. This is just a convenient way for us to see how this term sits in our polyhierarchy. So non-small cell lung cancer has two parents. One is lung cancer and the other one is non-small cell carcinoma. And then there are narrow terms which are specializing non-small cell lung carcinoma, like specific mutations that may occur in non-small cell lung cancer or carcinoma, and other terms. So the most important piece is, how do we get this into the business? And I think this is where, with our platform, we have a unique selling proposal. And you can see this here on the next tab, where we have the application space. Again, I'm clicking here, and I get the entity properties on the right side. So every application that is using RTS gets its own partition. And I'm just picking up here one example, which is a project we have done with medical affairs. So what you see here, this list is the list of all the productive applications that we have coupled with our terminology management system. And I'm just picking up here a connected platform, where we should see the entity properties here on the right side. So again, metadata, URI, status, definition, also information, who are the owners, how do they connect with our system, some statistics, what's being used. And in the connected platform, or in every application in these partitions, we can really customize the usage in a way that the consumer gets one-to-one what he or she needs. They don't get more, they don't get less. For those of you who are technically interested, we can achieve this by using so-called name graphs. So we say we define a context for an application, and this application, we can define the specifics. So on the left side, in the master terminology, you have seen the way how we govern all of these entries. So every entry that I'm allowed to use here in an application must be defined in the master terminology. If it is not there, the request goes to our team, and we are taking care of it. We're adding it. We do our due diligence. We provide a definition. We add the synonyms. We add the cross-references. And of course, most importantly, we check the semantic and the formal correctness of this request. So an application can have an arbitrary large number of so-called application terminologies. In this case, we have 10. And an application terminology can cover a subset of terms that you need. So let me just go here into the product terminology. So this product terminology has 276 entries. We always have these virtual nodes of 100 if there are too many, because otherwise the list would be too long. So I can open this up. And these are Roche drug products that have different names. We have trade names like for Actemra or Roctemra. We have so-called generic names. This is something that occurs in earlier phases of development, and we even have project codes and all of that stuff. So first very important feature is the consumer or the creator of these application terminologies, they only take the values that they really need. In the master terminology for products, we have 11,000 entries, and they just get the ones that they need. They don't get more, they don't get less. This is also something that we maintain when the applications are productive. Second point, which also helps a lot, is that when they select an entry term here, they are not bound to the preferred label we're giving in the master terminology. They can locally select any valid synonym of this term from the synonym list. So if they would like to see, for example, tocilizumab as a preferred label, they would just select it from here and save it. I don't do it because I'm on production, but they can select whatever preferred label they want as long as it is a valid synonym. And last but not least, and I'm going to show this in a different facet here. Shall I still increase the font size, or is it okay? There was a comment here. I think it should be okay. They have a terminology here in this specific use case where we have a shared governance around scientific areas and indications. So in essence, at the top level, you see scientific areas like cardiovascular, hematology, oncology. So that's the top level. And then you have indications that you have also seen in the master that fall into this scientific area. And here in this specific project, they have decided to go only with a 3-tier hierarchy for these oncology terms, like first level lymphoma, and then you have Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and third level then has the various forms like B-cell, T-cell lymphoma. That's a consumer decision. So we can build the hierarchies for the consuming applications completely independently of the master. If they want to have a code list, we give them a code list. If they want to have 3 levels, we give them 3 levels. Of course, you have to discuss whether this is really solving their use case and what is adequate. But they really outsource the entire terminology management to our team, and they consume it from here. And now I will show you the wonderful side effect of this, going back to the master terminology. Because when we use these concepts in the application context, then they all have the same URI. And now if I would like to know, simply want to know, what do we know about non-small cell lung carcinoma? This is just a Sparkle query that is performed here. I see the result here in the master. So in the first column, you have the application, which is consuming the concept. In the second column, you see also the name of the application terminology, which doesn't have to be the same, right? Some people call it indication code list. Some people call it study indication, scientific area, as you've seen before. In the last column, you see the lexical variation, like non-small cell lung cancer, non-small cell lung carcinoma. There's also one application below using a non-small cell lung cancer here. Or the system also has the reverse order, like carcinoma, non-small cell lung cancer. It doesn't matter, because the meaning is represented by the URI that we ship to all these different systems that are consuming RTS. And this is really has been a booster, and because you can easily scale. So when I get a request for a new application, I say, we need scientific areas. And we need some indications, or we need these drug product names. In most cases, we already have 80-90% of these terms, and I can spin off an application in about 2 or 3 hours and say, okay, guys, here you already have your minimal viable product. You can start to implement on your technical interface and start using it. The other part, I think, which is quite important, is of course the governance around this, so that we really have a full control what goes into the dictionaries, and that we try to make also the application resources as harmonized as possible. And just going back to the slide I've shown to you before, so the applications that you will see then in the second part of the presentation here, like for example Avados, they have the terminologies in here. You see they have ways more application terminologies. Apollo is also using RTS. They have quite some. What you see here, this specific symbol, just to give you a hint, this is a so-called subscription. So sometimes applications have a shared governance model, and of course you don't want to maintain the same list application terminology many times like indication. So in this case, you see that the master list of applications of indications is maintained in the R&D dataset portal. That's what I'm going to show to you. And Apollo just subscribes. This also ensures that whenever they send a resource for an indication to the dataset portal, that this is a known resource and there are no consistency issues here. So sorry again. So all of the systems that you will see now in the second part of the presentation, Apollo, Avados, clinical data sharing environment, Quasar, and the dataset portal itself, they are all managed here in this tool, and we really ensure semantic consistency across the various applications and repositories on the dataset portal. So this is here more or less the master. And here again, you see there are more entries here. So picking up here an indication, so we have here currently serving statistics around 500 different, it's more 830 different indications that are coming from different masters. So that's all harmonized, fair from the very beginning. Just before I jump into the dataset portal itself, I also would like to mention that I'm very much a fan of smart APIs, JSON LD. So the applications that consume the terminologies from RTS, they are using now our version 3 of the API, and this is a fully fair API where you have all the semantics explained in the context header. So you see that's what I really find appealing about these JSON LDs or these smart APIs, that the semantics of the value unit pairs, the attributes and the values, is completely clear and transparent and sent together with the file. And by the way, those of you who know JSON LD, you can immediately serialize JSON LD as RDF and load it elsewhere. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. Now I would like to jump to the true fairy tale, the last part of this presentation, and alongside with a demo, and then we still have quite some time for questions. So the dataset portal that you have seen, it is an RTS. So the dataset portal is a data catalog of data catalogs. So it's a completely federated object, and the feeding data catalogs, they are completely diverse. We have biomarker data, we have clinical study data, we have digital biomarker data, we have imaging data, we have omics data, we have real-world data sets, completely disparate. But they are cataloged and stored in the source system, so they are completely distributed, maintained in a distributed way. But then they are published into the single dataset portal, and then they have one place where the scientist from different areas like development or our research and development organizations or diagnostic division, they can go there and search all these integrated data sets. But the key point is that this integration into the dataset portal comes for free. How does it happen? These are some screenshots. I can also show this to you in the live demo in a second. So we have here the biomedical data sets coming from specific resources. And then the data that is sent to semantically to the system can then also be used to drive facets. So you have facets for the repositories like Apollo that you can see here, or GeneStack, which is here. Also the indications, the phase, the study type, the molecule, everything is shipped into the dataset portal and transformationless read into the system. So, and this is something I'm going to show to you in the demo in a second. I just would like to give you some highlight here. So the dataset portal uses a semantic model, which is based on DCAT and provenance ontology. So following the FAIR principles, we have managed to provide this quite complex model without defining any proprietary property. So we follow the FAIR principles, use community standards if they are available. So we have Dublin Core, we have DCAT, we have provenance ontology, we have many other resources. And we were exclusively using these resources to model the content. It's published as a Bidoko document that I will show to you in a second. And everything which is here is also resources, like a person can be resolved to a resource, or we have also parts of the organization like pharma informatics. This is something that takes you to RTS, the terminology system I've shown to you. So everything is fully semantic. All the terminologies is semantic. You will see that in a second. The key point here is, again, related to the FAIR data points, to the JSON LD. I really like the notion of these FAIR data points. All of the feeding systems, they have their internal. So we don't tell them how they represent their data, if they use a relational database, if they use a doc store, if they use a triple store. We don't care. The essential thing is that they are using the URIs to describe the data. And then we have a data contract where each of these systems exposes the data in exactly the same way using JSON LD. And now think about what we are talking today in terms of data products. Because this is key to me. Today, if you are the consumer of data and you want to have data, you are in a bad position because you have to write ETL processes. You have to create data integration layers. You have to write all these connectors and whatever you need. But what we are doing here is, again, inverting the picture and saying, okay, whatever application contains this kind of knowledge, wherever it resides, if they expose the data in the same way using these data contracts based on fair and fully semantic descriptions with JSON LD, then I can pull my data from the various data points. So taking the idea of data products seriously is that the responsibility for consuming data, for making data available, shifts from the consumer to the data owner, to the data producer. And I think this is where this R&D dataset portal is really a fantastic success story. We possibly should also write a paper about this. So that means that all the systems that are downstream that I've seen before, they publish the data in the same way, and the integration comes completely transformationless without data connectors. Here you have a little bit a glimpse of how this JSON LD API looks like. So a little bit tiny, but you have here unique identifiers. We also have an identifier service internally. Then the data sharing environment exposes a URI for the catalog element. And all of the rest is adoption of, for example, here, DCAT and other elements. So very, very progressive. You also have, for example, the data sharing policy, the licensing policy here in terms of URIs. Also the resources, the clinical study itself comes in terms of URI. And here you see that this is coming from our platform. This is about the different terms, the terminologies that they're using. The file format here, for example, comes as a URI. The version of the standard that has been used comes in terms of URI. The system from which the data comes, retrieved from, is also coming from, I think, DCAT is coming here as a URI. So this is really putting this philosophy to the very, very beginning. And now the last slide here, then I jump into the demo, is really about the difference is by taking this approach, your data are not only machine readable, they're also machine actionable. And this also allows you, for example, to automatically calculate a fair score for your data using the semantic descriptions that you have in the model, and then comparing this against the data that you receive. And there's also a little bit of misunderstanding. Some people that really argue, okay, why is my fair score so unexpectedly low? 3 maybe instead of 4 or 5. And people sometimes confuse data quality with fair. For example, if you are conforming to a standard, conformity is a data quality KPI, but you can conform to standards like CDISC or so without being fair. Fair is really about fair strict, with a systematic use of URIs for data, metadata, and the schemata that you are using. So with this, I go briefly into the demo again, and then I think just do it briefly, and I think then we have still maybe 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So here you see this dataset portal with, just wanted to go here. That's the dataset portal. And then you see on the next slide, you see all these catalogs, which are published into the dataset portal. These are all queries to our triple store, to the implementation. So what you have seen before. And these are all in RTS. So we maintain all the data. So we have different number of data sets. Clinical data sharing environment, for example, has 5,000 data sets. Quasar, about high dimensional and low dimensional biomarkers, has 3,000. It's all calculated automatically. And behind this, we have the terminologies that you've seen before. So that's now the local replica of what you can find in RTS with all the URIs. So what are all the different code lists? And then what are all the corresponding values with the identifier that can be dereferenced to our system. And last but not least, let me just go here into the Vidoku. So this is where we have our pharma specification with the various versions of the model. So last release was already a while ago, so that's pretty much established. The authors of the standards and also people who contributed to it, coming from different functions that you can also then resolve different serializations. I mean, this comes as a feature with Vidoku. And then you give the introduction, all the various, say, namespaces that we have been using. So our identifier service, DCAT, DCT, friend of a friend, identifier, original vocabularies, provenance authoring, versioning, provenance ontology, RDF, RDFS, RTS, our tool, schema.org, SCOS, and so on. And in there, then you can really take a look at the various classes, the object properties, the data properties, the annotation properties, with a web wall visualization of the model. Also have here. That's the key of the data set coming from DCAT, where you have a data set that comes in terms of a distribution. A data set has versions. Subsequently, the distribution is a collection of files that have different properties that are also described, and everything is here transparent and can be browsed and accessed. I mean, of course, you hide this complexity to the audience, and they only see this in the interface. But again, I think, to the best of my knowledge, this is really one of the very, very few success stories where putting semantics prospectively into your various systems, building on an architecture which is fair, which is making heavy use of URIs for terminologies, for metadata, for schemata, and for ontologies, and then being able to just read this in automatically without touching any line of code is a very, very appealing story. And I think also looking into Dave's book about the data-centric revolution, where he also says that classical IT likes integration layers, which cost a lot of money and create a lot of delay and stuff like this. Ideally, I don't see this, by the way, as a Roche topic. I think ideally, as an industry, we would like to converge and being able to have more of these fair data points where we can integrate data more easily, acquire data more easily, generate data more easily. I don't want to spend too much time on the model. I think you believe that it is something which is well conceived, but it also illustrates to a certain extent that the complexity behind the dataset portal with all the various objects that you can see here. And yeah, now we are, this is on production and has been on production for a couple of years. And a lot of people are really taking this as their first entry point to accessing our various data. So it's a data catalog of data catalogs. I mean, some minor conclusions here. I think if you really want to be successful with digitization and generate value out of your data assets, you have to go to true machine readable, actionable data. Machine readability is not sufficient, and this really puts you into the realm of the FAIR principles and semantic technologies, as I say in the next. So FAIR data principles tie data management into semantic technologies, so you have to use terminologies, dataset definitions, ontologies. And data transformation is data integration based on these fully harmonized and standardized machine actionable data assets, which we call FAIR by design, really result in a fully linked data ecosystem that allow you to do more reliable insights in less time and at lower costs. And looking into the data management value chain that we are having, we have to go down the road of new architectural approaches around data information and semantic interoperability of terminologies, the dataset definitions, and the ontologies is key to make our data assets really machine actionable. And at the end of the day, I think this is possibly something that is the elephant in the room for classical IT organizations or the blind spot. We have to be ways more conscious about semantics. And with this, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from the team and open the floor for question if time permits.
Yeah, we've got a question here. I'm actually just going to show it up on the stage so you can read it.
Yeah. That's a very good one. So you may know that there's currently a project going on in the Pistoia Alliance about developing an IDMP ontology. IDMP currently comes as the standard comes in terms of PDF documents, so it's not fully machine readable. And the SPORE, where you have the substances, the products, the organizations, and the referentials, this is available, but there are 2 points that strike me. So the first point is there are so many resources that are defined, in particular in the referentials, that already exist elsewhere. Why do we again create a new resource? Things like countries, route of administration, dosage form, we have them in many, many other standards. So why do we create new resources again? And I would also say that from a semantic perspective, there are some issues, some engineering issues in IDMP, in the spore model, where, for example, you have when you have a URL for a code list element, so a concept, this concept, it has the identifier of the code list in the URL. And this really prevents you from abstracting away, and you have to store the full URL. And typically, you would not state this in the URL. If you are semantics, you would use scos and say, okay, scos in scheme. So everything that is semantic you shouldn't put any semantics into your URLs. That should be called out with the semantic descriptions that we can extract from scos and so on. So alignment is a huge issue. I think we still have a huge proliferation of standards. We're still adding standards. I would rather like to see maybe if we have one URI for a country, if you have one URI for a region, if you have one URI for a dosage form, and so on. So we are talking to those people and we are working on it, but it puts more effort. So in our case, what we are doing is that when we have our country terminology, we create the cross-reference to the referential for countries from the IDMP model into RTS, into our terminology system.
Great.
More questions?
Oh, just a comment here from Jonathan Storm. Great presentation. Your organization is light years ahead of most. Very inspiring.
Thanks a lot.
Martin, I got a question for you here in regards to, I mean, certainly you showed a lot. I mean, there's a great deal of information in the platform. And I think it would be interesting for our community to get a sense of the size and the nature of the skills your team has that supports this operationally. And I mean, usually these types of efforts are like an army, a couple hundred people that are doing these types of things. But I know that you're going to give us an answer that's going to relatively astonish people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the team that is working on this is relatively slim. So we are globally seven internal FTEs. And we have about 3 consultants that help us on the content and curation part. And we have for bulk activities, we also have a small team of 6 people in India. And I think the core intent, or what makes it so easy for us, is the reusability. So when a new application comes in and they need, as I've demoed before to a certain extent, and they need to set up an indication list, we have productivity tools that takes the input list. We automatically generate the mappings, we review everything, we create it, and then we just load it through the API. And this allows us really to serve a lot with a smaller team. And I think what's also very important to mention at this stage is that from the small team we belong to, we invest about 20% of our time in developing and operating the platform. And 80% really goes into what we call these scientific integration or harmonization projects. So it is not sufficient to put out a technology or to try to bring a philosophy of working into the organization. You have to support the people doing so. And what is really, really a nice experience is that when the people understand that you're there to support them and to help them, that you get a huge buy-in. So we have a lot of people who are really happy of our service, and they really are fully engaged. And we have this data harmonization service behind, which treats a lot of tickets per week where we get requests, but it's combining, the best of the semantic world, the fair world, the data centric world with governance and highly skilled people that know about science, that know about terminologies, ontologies, and they also know about semantics.
Perfect. Thank you. And just to, since there isn't any other questions, I'm going to ask another one here, Martin. And you're moving into a new role, and you mentioned earlier when we were backstage that this is a new, more enterprise role. And can you elaborate more on how the success of what you've created can be leveraged for that broader adoption? And this also might be a big ask, but share a little bit more about the roadmap for extension that you envision.
I think there are 2 points. So one is that I think we haven't advertised this capability so far. So we are more or less get our new tasks by recommendation management. And I think there is the need in large organization like ours is huge. I don't know. I would guess there are hundreds of teams that maintain code lists and don't have the skills and the tools to do so properly. And of course, there are different needs in different functions. Like commercial has different needs than possibly manufacturing. So I think if you want to scale out, I think you may want to work in a kind of a hub and spoke model, where say you build similar teams as I was working on now in research in different functions, and then we maintain the technology and the framework and then the masters here more in the hub, so at a global scale. That's one point. I think the other point is to say do a little bit of upskilling in a classical IT organization that to bring semantics closer to them. I think typically say solution architects or software developers, when you talk to them about JSON LD, they don't really see what it is for or why should they use a harmonized, verified schema for their JSON interfaces. I think the other point is that the typical master data management, and also as mentioned by Katharina in the talk before, this is a completely different universe. And one of the quick wins we're looking into is, and this starts to take off with, we start to tell people in master data management or also people having a registration system, why can't we start to issue systematically URIs? If we synthesize large molecules, if we have small molecules that register in a compound registration system, if we have master data around projects, around themes, and stuff like this, because these resources, they can be used once and for all. We can distribute them. And just to convert the thinking, the mindset at the enterprise level is a tough mission, I would say. Also, in a more conservative IT organization, and this is something that I see as a vision, but also as a huge challenge. And also, I think from the line management in the department I belong to now, there's great support to do so. So bringing enterprise data closer to semantics and bringing semantics closer to enterprise data. That's a little bit the mission statement in a nutshell. Yeah, and I think there's a question about OntoForce. I think OntoForce is a fantastic tool. I possibly have, the idea would be to say when you want to bring data into OntoForce, you still have all of these or similar tools. It doesn't have to be OntoForce. There are, of course, other products on the market. But I think in essence, the process is always the same. So you have input data feeds, which are poorly harmonized and standardized. And then you have to run ETL processes. You take indications and you normalize them to mesh or to NCR thesaurus terms. And then you are building the knowledge graph. What we want to achieve is that the underlying infrastructure already implements domain-specific knowledge graphs, very, very small knowledge graphs. But when you aggregate them, they, as in the dataset portal, they naturally connect. So you can aggregate a company, a corporate knowledge graph from the set of knowledge graphs that you build around, and then you can put this into any kind of technology. And OntoForce indeed is a fantastic tool. But looking around also with other solution providers, I don't want to drop names here. At the end of the day, they are all doing the same. They are really helping us to overcome the deficiencies that we have in our data management projects. And I think we have to go back to the beginning, to the root, and implement FAIR and semantics prospectively where data are acquired and generated.
Any other questions, JT, that you see?
Maybe just a final comment from my side. I'm also very, very much into the point that many of these topics are industry topics.
Yes.
And the more we align as a community and get support from companies like yours, for example, to harmonize. I mean, you also mentioned reference models, generic like GIST or so. This really helps. So I really don't see this as a Roche topic. I see this as a pharma topic, or even beyond. In other cases, there are so many resources that we could semantically align as communities, and we don't have to do this 100 times across all different companies and organizations.
Yes, indeed.
Very good. I don't see any other ones. Oh, yep.
Martin, thank you so much. This was fascinating and just great information to cover. And I think that you've addressed some of the concepts that are a realization of what everyone's trying to do, and you were able to do it. So I think that your next journey into the enterprise certainly is going to have its challenges that you mentioned, but I think that building on your success is going to be able to be a great momentum starter.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and also thanks to the colleagues on the call for listening and for asking the questions.